would you agree that one of the things that we kind of find ourselves doing as clinicians, but also parents or limited reparenting from a schema therapy perspective, is holding the hope for our patients, holding the hope that things are going to get better, that they can master certain things, that things will pass. When we work with this particular mode that we're going to go into at the moment, what happens is holding the hope starts to become quite challenging. I'm Rita. I'm a clinical psychologist and advanced schema therapist supervisor trainer, and you're here watching 7-Minute Schemas.
Yeah, Rita, I'm Ruth Holt. I'm also advanced level schema therapist supervisor trainer. And I agree, this mode is a mode that can actually steal hope, can, in fact, it's called that, right? The hopeless surrenderer. It's a mode that in schema terms is where we really submit to those deeply ingrained schemas that we have grown up with. Those schemas that tell us that it's never going to get better. I don't deserve it. No one's ever going to hear me. And so when people are in this mode, they are really fused with those schemas, and it can feel, in a way, vulnerable. It can feel sad, distressed, but it's not the vulnerable child. And that's an important distinction.
Absolutely. And that's where the limited reparenting comes in. So if we're here wanting to kind of hold the hope and provide guidance and strengths and those kinds of things, when it is this coping mode, it doesn't actually land in the way that we want it to. Because again, that coping mode's getting in the way. And some of the schemas that might be fueling this particular coping mode include negativity, pessimism, punishment, perhaps, defectiveness, shame. And if it's kind of a little bit more of a helpless flavor, then we're looking at kind of dependence, incompetence, or failure.
Yeah, so people can really get that sense of, well, that might have worked with someone else, but it won't work for me. I can't do that. Nothing ever works. And one of the things we want to be really curious about is, where did they learn this mode? Where did this mode come from? Because if it's a coping mode, it will have an origin. It will have a reason for being. And for some clients, the reason they learnt this sense of hopelessness or helplessness was in an environment where change didn't happen. So I often will say to people, imagine if you woke up every day and you said to yourself, today's the day that mum's not going to have that concern or that illness, or today's the day dad's not going to drink. You would be disappointed every single day. So it's very adaptive in an environment where change doesn't happen to kind of sink into a sense of, this is my life, this is my lot. But now then, as adults, I keep sinking into that sense of hopelessness in a way that actually makes it hard for change to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of almost a default, isn't it? Sometimes there could be this kind of conditioned response that if I feel a little bit of hope, that what then happens is I find myself defaulting into hopelessness. And part of the work could be just kind of bringing this to somebody's conscious awareness that this is what tends to happen. There's a good thing, and then there comes that hopelessness. But it's a really good question to even ask your clients without having to find a solution for them. How is it helpful for that little kid to be hopeless? What was the function? What did it do for that little kid?
Mm-hmm. Did it help them avoid disappointment? Did it help them to have expectations that were going to be met? Did it help them receive care? So for some people, having to really express a lot of distress was the only way that they would get care. So perhaps they had to be physically sick because emotions weren't particularly considered important. And so again, we want to be really curious about what's the role of this coping mode, and also how is it different to the vulnerable child mode? Because sometimes what I find, this coping mode will talk a lot about distress, but I'm not always feeling the distress. Or another distinction is that if I'm distressed in a vulnerable way, I can be soothed. As the therapist helps me, as they listen and validate, it reduces my distress. But if I'm in this coping mode, the distress doesn't reduce. The point of the mode is to stay in the distress, so I can't be soothed.
Yeah, and that's again another way in which this coping mode could manifest and develop over the years. Some other ways could be a selective internalization. Perhaps there was someone, a caregiver or somebody that was quite hopeless about things, catastrophic, etc. And so they've just kind of internalized that way of understanding future events, etc. Another way could be that, if people are somewhat parentified or they're going through really kind of difficult times and there's no one there to support them. And so through kind of neglect for whatever reason, they kind of learn different ways to make sense of what's going on, and maybe it's me. And so this kind of hopeless, negative punishment of the self is a default to try and understand how to make sense of what's going on.
So one of the things, if you're a person who's working with a client, or if you are someone who feels like, yeah, maybe I do have this mode, is to kind of notice, what does it feel like in my body when I'm in this mode? Does it feel kind of like a sinking feeling, a hopeless feeling? Where do I feel that? And then what's different when I'm in a more vulnerable state that can be soothed? Maybe I've not actually had much experience of vulnerability in a way that allows another person to be there with me. And that's a really, I think, important thing. We want to help identify those differences, maybe even do some chair work, or even kind of catch the signature. Often there's a kind of a sinking, or you can see my shoulders going down, my stomach dropping, my gaze going down.
And that's a really good point about the somatic signature, because I was just kind of thinking of that. And you and I have spoken about, some of our own patients where when we've finally got some rapport, we've really understood this mode, where sometimes it'll be a case of, I want you to walk out and come back in again, and just kind of this time put your shoulders back. And it's okay to kind of have distress or things that are weighing you down. We want to be there for you in that. But when that coping mode steps into the room, that part of you that needs that support, that connection, that understanding and validation really genuinely misses out. And that's why we get you to come back in a different emotional state physically, so that we can actually do the work.
Well, there's our 7 minutes, Rita. If people want to find more about training, about how to work with this particularly difficult mode, the link at the end of the video.